Hey guys, welcome back to Star Wars Timeline. Meg and I are here to continue our conversation about the new Jedi Order. For those of you who have been following us, we started our discussion. We're going to go through this entire series. So you may ask a question, what is this all about? Meg, if you don't mind, I'll give us a quick introduction, see where we're at, situate the audience, and we'll start moving from there. So the new Jedi Order is an epic 19-book series that was written between 1999 and 2003, which had ebooks and novellas and full novels covering a lot of expanded universe materials. As of 2014, these are no longer considered canon. They're part of Star Wars Legends. This series portrays the events from 21 to 25 years after the events of the original movies. This is the time where Luke Skywalker is reestablishing the new Jedi Order, and this galaxy is invaded by intergalactic invaders called the Yuuzhan Vong. Before I get us caught up with the previous episode that you and I talked, Meg, thank you so much for coming over. I miss talking to you. You're so passionate. You keep pumping out awesome reviews. Please let me know what's going on with you. Where are you in terms of your Star Wars reading, or any shows, anything else you've been checking out aside from Star Wars?
Yes, I'm so glad I'm back. I was gone for a while because I got sick. But I'm back. It's great. I am still trying to trek my way through the prequels era novels that came out between 1999 and 2005. I just finished a interesting one called Jedi Trial, and I'm currently reading one of my favorites, which is Yoda Dark Rendezvous by Sean Stewart. I am grateful for the little break they're doing right now with the High Republic, because I'm still trying to get caught back up. And in the meantime, I've been watching a lot of TV.
Have you checked out the latest Sandman?
I have not. I have heard really good things about it, especially that like one of the episodes is phenomenal. I've been trying to get through all the backlog I had built up. So like I got through Stranger Things season 4 and slowly moving forward.
Yeah, I'm freaking loved Stranger Things. Like each episode was just a personal love letter to me. I was so engrossed with it. And not as a huge fan of Neil Gaiman, like I only read one of his books, but I was vaguely aware of Sandman comic book series because, I mean, they're widely known around the comic book audience. And I was just going in completely cold without any expectations. I just saw one first episode with my younger brother, blew me away. Just blew me away. I'm like, all right, when I get the chance to talk with you, I'll probably recommend it to you. Just give it a shot. Maybe you'll like it.
Yeah.
So, Meg, to catch us up, we started, you and I continued our conversation with duology, and we covered one book only because the second book, which we're going to discuss today, it just takes its own time. There's several parallel storylines going on there. But let me quickly catch our fans to where we were in our previous conversation and continue on forward. So we left off with the first book in the Edge of Victory duology. That one was called The Conquest. And it's basically these interstellar invaders, intergalactic invaders, Yuuzhan Vong, they have brought their war to Yavin 4. We learned that Anakin Skywalker and Tahiri Vela, they are essential to this war effort. They make some unlikely allies among their enemies, like Varapung warrior and Nian Yu, the Shaper, which we're going to discuss in this second book today. We also learned that Anakin discovers new tactics to fight the Vong. Right, he learns this Vong sense, and he also gets a part of the Lambient crystal, which he installs in his broken lightsaber, and now he has this Vong sense. He can sense his opponents, a tactic which was previously unavailable to Jedi Order, and that's why they were not fighting on even ground. So the older Jedi make their escape. They're saved by Talon Karrde, Booster Tarek, and Corran Horn, who also is back from his self-imposed exile on Corellia. He was accused of being like the killer that helped destroy the world of the Ithorians. But now that he's back, he was able to recover from that emotional turmoil. And once again, learning that Anakin and Tahiri are crucial to this war. So now we begin with The Edge of Victory, Rebirth, which is also written by the same author, Greg Keyes. This one was released in July of 2001. And there's several plots going on here. And I would like to pursue it this way, Meg. Let me give a quick gist of a plot line, and then I discuss. I have some very fun questions I've prepared for you. I know you have tons of things to say, and I can't wait to hear it. And we'll just go from there. We'll go, subplot by subplot and subplot. And for those of you guys who are listening, just keep in mind, even though we're breaking it down, those plots are happening concurrently because obviously novel is not an anthology. It is one full-blown novel, just separate storylines tracking together alongside one another, so you're not confused. So the first plot line that we begin with involves Anakin Solo, his young Jedi friend Tahiri Vela, and Jedi Master Corran Horn. So the three Jedi are on this planet Iriado, and they're getting the supplies for their ship errant venture. So they overhear this new information, this Yag duel, which was passed on by this fallen Rodian Jedi, and they understand it's a place of importance. Something is about to happen there. They're intercepted by the Vong fleet, but they're able to escape to what they now learn is a planet of Yagdul, where they need to warn the local population of the given people that a major attack is about to commence. In the meantime, the Yuzang Van infiltrator, their ultimate spy, Nomanor, he sets up a trap for them. So our gang is captured, and Anakin challenges Yuzang Van warrior Shak Choka in a battle of honor. He defeats the warrior, he decapitates them, and this is how our Jedi, there's a bunch of action going on there, and they manage to escape. While Corran Horn is looking for spacesuits and arranges for them to escape, Anakin and Tahiri hide in a locker. And this is where there's a romantic scene happening between the two. Before we complete this particular thread line, what's happening, I already have a couple of questions for you. First and foremost, do you enjoy this format of storytelling, these more bulkier novels where there's several storylines happening at one point? And do you ever feel like either confused, or does it give you a sense of epic scale? How do you react to those kind of formats?
Yeah, I have to say, within the new Jedi Order series, I think my favorite books were the ones that only focused on mainly one person. So we've got, Anakin's story in Conquest, Han's story in Hero's Trial. And I like the epic scope of ones like Rebirth, where we've got all these different threads in play. But I feel like sometimes I reach a breaking point where it's like I can only keep track of so many things, and I'll end up, anyone who reads them will end up having favorite characters, favorite plot lines.
Right.
And sometimes with those epic ones, when we cut away to someone I'm not as interested in, I get a little catchy. I'm like, oh, this one, why can't we go back to Anakin and Tahiri? But it does, even when I don't like them, I can see how it gives you so many different viewpoints into things that is, a lot of times it will seem like, oh, these are very disparate events. I don't know how they'll link up in the end, but then, everyone gets maneuvered into place. So
And yeah, I understand what you're saying. And we also have to remember that we're dealing not just with a sole book, a standalone novel. It's part of a big epic storytelling event, right? As we mentioned earlier in this podcast, it's 19 books long. And to track all the characters, what's happening, sometimes you'll have a character jumping into a novel and get, set aside for a few books later on. And to keep track of everything that is happening, I can definitely see how it can be compounding. For example, one of my friends mentions to me, hey, have you ever read, I know you read fantasy a lot, this Game of Thrones series, this is way back before the TV show was announced. And he said, check it out, you'll probably like it. You might get stuck in the beginning because there are so many clans and families and factions being introduced, but just chug through it and eventually you'll enjoy it because I know you enjoy these kind of epic stories. So for me, honestly, the reason that I'm asking you this question is because I can't fully recall how I responded to the format because it's been years since I read it. Right. But I guess because I'd go between a video game and a TV show and a novel that I'm reading in English, and then a parallel to that, I'm reading a book in Russian. One is a fictional novel, another one is a biopic, or anything like that. I kind of trained myself, but even I reached that point where it's hey, hold on a second. Thank God for Wikipedia now. Yes. Because you could quickly reference a species or just a certain faction or planet, go back to it and revisit, but it could definitely be disconcerting a little bit.
Yeah, it's thinking back when I reread them last year, I had Wikipedia. Anytime I had a question, I just look it up on Wikipedia. And then trying to think back to when they were released, I was like, did I just assume I didn't know that and keep going? And that's exactly what happened.
And the next question has to do with, obviously, our heroes of this beginning plot are Anakin and Tahiri. And we know that they were involved heavily in the previous Kevin J. Anderson's books, the Young Jedi Knights and the other Young Jedi series. And we see the continuation of their individual character developments up to this point. So how do you feel about them, just not in relationship to one another? That's the next question. But how do you feel these characters have been prepped by the authors up to this point? Were they effective enough? Were you invested in them? Was there anything that was lacking?
No, I have to say, I think of the plot lines in Rebirth, I think Anakin and Tahiri's story was maybe my favorite. And I think part of that was coming out of Conquest, learning so much about them, seeing Tahiri's struggles and how Anakin is realizing that he has this responsibility to the younger Jedi who look up to them. I really enjoyed their plot line here. I thought it continued what had been built in the first book, that Tahiri is basically, she went through a hugely traumatic experience and she's just trying to get back to normal here. She's trying to, be what she once was, but the Jedi around her are, if not suspicious of her, like not sure how to approach her. And I think that's why she clings to Anakin so much, because Anakin treats her the same as he always done. And in fact, their relationship is like growing and maturing. And Anakin in the previous book has started to realize that when he acts recklessly, it influences others to act the same way. So he knows that's a part of himself that he needs to work on. But then we'll have things like Corrin goes, I'm heading in, you guys stay on the ship. And because they're like 15, they sit there for about 5 minutes. They're like, oh, I hear a noise. And they investigate anyway.
Yeah, I felt that both Tahiri and Anakin are uncharacteristically old for their years, the way they're portrayed in novels, and understandably so, because they're in the middle of war. There's no time to fool around. You got to step your game up. And I always was gravitating towards Anakin's very introspective, mature approach on things. Even as a kid, he's like, hey, maybe this is not the way. He looks into him much more so than Jason does. Jason always projects outwardly. If something doesn't make sense to him, if something doesn't connect in the galaxy, it doesn't work, it's always the exterior that is wrong, and it's never him. And we see how those things translate into the future, obviously in Star Wars Legacy, a series that I really hope you and I get to chat about. But with Anakin, it's completely opposite. And to me, Tahiri became one of my fan favorites because, as you and I discussed in our previous podcast, I felt constantly so worried about her, like her physical disfigurement. I wanted her to be back to normal, about her emotional turmoil. Like, oh my God, what a horrid thing for a young person, a young woman to experience. I mean, regardless of gender, just any person, the things that she goes through and the strength of character that she has. And obviously, she has this pull to this young man who serves as the beacon of light for the rest of the Jedi, where the adults are kind of like they're trying to do some fencing with New Republic's politics. Luke Skywalker is preoccupied how to, lead the war on all fronts and the general strategy. Anakin is here on a minute-to-minute basis trying to figure this thing out and trying to figure out who he is. So my next question is, did Anakin's and Tahiri's growing romantic relationship in this book, did it feel natural to you? And obviously that scene where they're stuck in a locker and they share kisses and there's revelation, he makes a confession to her.
It did. I could see it growing out of what had happened in the previous book, that I think especially the fact that they hadn't really seen each other for a little bit because of the war, that they're accustomed to spending all their time together because they're both at the Jedi Academy at the same time. And then Anakin goes off essentially behaving like an adult and Tahiri's left behind. And now they have this common experience that they both lived through. They're teenagers, and Yeah, I think they're so cute.
Hormones, right, which is a totally natural thing. There's something to be said about, right, they say in psychology, when two people experience either a exhilarating, a thrilling moment, that's why, a lot of couples in, age gone by always would go to something like a cartwheel, the devil's wheel, or something like that, like a momentous experience, or like ice skating. That's like, you feel a little bit of excitement. It kind of physically brings people a bit together. I mean, these kids are experiencing war.
Yeah.
But it's not just in this moment. We also know that they share a past as children, right, on Yavin 4. So all of that kind of like combines together. So for me as well, it did feel very, very natural. And when it came time to kiss, my response was like, finally, it's about time. Because as a young man, right, you remember, I'm sure you remember, like your first, perhaps a romantic experience is like, it's sort of that wall of uncomfort that you got to jump over, and your reward is like, wow, they're kissing, and hopefully you hope for the best as you're reading on this series along. So later what happens in this particular thread is our three Jedi, they flee the Vong ship, and Nominor, he executes all the witnesses to hide his cowardice because he refused to face Corran Horn in that honor duel, which is typical of Nominor. And fortunately, the Given people down on the planet, they're victorious and they're able to defend Yagdul. A Vong fleet withdraws to Serpendal. Now, let's talk about your thoughts on Nominor, and specifically his relationship with his own chain of command, with his own people.
I think this shows like him being willing to execute everyone who saw him, do something dishonorable. It does show like how scheming he is, that he doesn't agree with Volm's values, but he also doesn't want to be ratted out. That he'd rather lie to his superiors and have no one to contradict what he says. And it's like, but he still wants to be a part of the Volm. He's another one of my favorite characters. He's just so slippery.
Yeah, definitely slippery.
For a Volm.
I didn't know how to react to his tactics and means to an end that he constantly goes through, and all of these decisions that he makes. I'm like, okay, does his way represent the very best of the Yozang Vong? Is this who they are as people? Because, for example, among the Sith, it's that relationship with the master and apprentice. It fosters that, like, you're supposed to betray your master. You're supposed to betray the guy, especially after Darth Bane trilogy, where he introduces the rule of two, where this is how you sustain yourself. You focus on the strongest two, and the rest don't matter. So even if among your ranks somebody betrays you, somebody backstabs you. For example, I'm playing the Star Wars: The Old Republic MMORPG, and I'm playing as a Sith character, and it's like a common day thing for them. They expect you to betray them at one point because that's a demonstration of strength. With Nominor, I didn't necessarily feel that. I'm like, okay, so they're savage, vicious aliens, but they have some sense of common goal. They have a sense of their own warped way of respect and standing up for one another. I really enjoyed Nominor's tactic, not like supporting like, yay, good job, well done. But I'm saying I found it intriguing that he's willing to do everything that is necessary according to what he believes. He's a coward at one point. He has very despicable qualities that you would never admire about a person. But at the same time, like, God damn, dude, the length you're willing to go to accomplish your goals. All right, man. It's like not a lot of Vong could do the same.
Yeah, I feel like the Volm as a whole don't have no sense of self-preservation. Yeah. That if something would benefit the better good of the Volm, they'll throw their lives away, except for Nominor, who is really one of the very few Volm who can like look at a situation and go, oh no, back away.
Yeah. And it also, paints a very compelling picture that not all is well with the Yozang Vong. They didn't come into this galaxy as one concerted effort. It's like, we're gonna go in, this is what we're gonna do. In other words, they're not Borg, all channeled into the same programming, and everybody, acting according to what their designated role. You have some bickering going on there. You also have a lot of egoism and a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? When you want to rise above the rest.
Oh yeah, yeah. They're always trying to one up each other.
Yeah.
Feels, especially the military guys.
My God, what's the word I'm looking for? Never mind. And but yeah, it just shows you how complex that culture is, because also you and I, we talked about in the previous podcast how it's such a well fleshed out species as a whole. Like I made a comparison to the Klingons in the Star Trek universe. It's like there's so much with their culture, so much with their like warfare tactics and everything. There's just it made it really interesting and more complex and thus more believable, I guess.
Yeah.
The second parallel plot that is happening here, we have a very atypical Jedi Master Kib Duran. Him and his X-Wing squadron, along with the New Republic fleet, commanded by General Wedge Antilles, they're trying to track down Jaina Solo. She plans to attack Serpentine shipyards to destroy a potential superweapon, basically a preemptive strike. But after the battle, she discovers that there were Yuzong Vang civilians, and she confronts Kib Duran about it. And basically, she learns that he is also, unlike other Jedi, he's willing to step over that line, because as he relates his feelings to her, this is his way to avenge the fallen Jedi and the New Republic citizens. That if the Yuzong Vang are so savage and they're willing to go this far, we're basically going to fight fire with fire.
Yeah.
So my first question is, tell me a little bit about your impression of Jaina's outlook on the war. Is she a naive child soldier, or is she a wise beyond her years, a seasoned Jedi Knight at this point?
I think she's a little bit of both, because obviously Kype Duran's able to take advantage of her. He shows her what she wants to see, you know. He shows her this, and she wants it to be a super weapon, and she wants them to be able to stop it. But when things don't add up, she realizes that he lied by omission, that he used her and used the New Republic military to achieve his ends. So I think Jaina started out like in Rogue Squadron as an idealist, but that as the war progresses and she sees, you know, she loses her wingmate, she's grievously wounded in Balance Point, she just sort of sees that like war is not noble, and it's not, you know, this heroic thing, that it's just tiring and you lose a lot of people even when you win. It's
a very sobering experience.
Yeah. And I think it makes her, same as Anakin and Tahiri, that she's maturing beyond her physical years just because of the experiences she's going through.
Yeah. My reaction to that very, very difficult dynamic between the older Jedi Master and, you know, to Kib Duran's defense, he also has endured a lot of hardship coming from the mines of Kessel, you know, being separated from his family. He has also like harmed. There's a lot of personal growth things to do, even though he's older in her years. But I still found that dynamic kind of uncomfortable. Yes. He's coming up to her. He's like, 12 years her senior, I think, somewhere around that time. I'm like, dude, what are you doing? First of all, there's no time for romantic relationship, even though the Jedi from Star Wars Legends are quite different from the prequel, you know, celibate monk Jedi. It's you know, it's not taboo to have a kind of relationship. But dude, she is Han Solo's daughter. She's a teenager. She's confused a lot of things. So you, like you said, very rightly so. He's using her. He's exploiting her. He's showing her the picture she wants to see. But Jaina just has too much of Luke Skywalker's streak in her, where she treads on the edge of the dark side, but she never plummets. She's like, she always knows when she steps back. And I think it's a quality she shares a lot with Anakin Solo, but not with Jacen Solo. So in that respect, even though Jacen and Jaina are twins, Jaina and Anakin are a lot more alike, and Jacen is just a different person. Yeah. Oh,
Jaina and Kype's interactions in here. You're right. They're so uncomfortable. You read them and he's like, yeah, I could be your Jedi master, but there's like this undercurrent of like sexual tension the whole time.
Mhm.
You're reading it and you're going like, no, no, but no.
Did they kiss at one point? I don't remember. I think there was some kind of brush there, or he gets like
Yeah,
really close to her. He tries to basically intimates to her, is like, "Hey, I'm digging you."
yeah. I know that it's like it sort of continues into later books and then they put the kibosh on it. 'Cause I don't know if other readers were like me reading it being like,
Yeah, yeah, I was uncomfortable. And once again, I'm coming from the angle that I could sympathize with Kip Durant. He, like all human beings, he's complex. You
yeah,
don't just see one side of the person and go like, "Ew, what a creep." This is such a modern sensibility where we kind of like deface and devalue people, and we strip them down to just one simple reaction, and we judge them, that we like basically assert a whole person based on one thing. Obviously, Kip Durant definitely has his heroic moments. He
yeah.
definitely comes through for the Jedi Order. It's just I think it's good the way that the authors wrote him, that we as readers constantly question his ways.
Yes. Yeah, you're always, at least until farther on the series, you're always a little unsure about Kype because he did in the Jedi Academy trilogy, he fell to the dark side. So I think there's always that tension within him, like, he redeemed himself, but will he fall again?
Mm-hmm. And the last question is regard to the second subplot. How would you compare the Yuzhong Vong to the Jedi Order culturally or in battle tactics? What's the comparison between the two?
Yeah. Well, with the Yuzon Valn, I think with this attacking this baby world ship, and
Mm-hmm.
then what we will see with Nen Yim's plotline is that this book really showed us a side of the Yuzon Valn beyond like the military guys and the people like leading the war effort, that we saw there are civilians, there are Yuzon Vald who support what they're doing but aren't involved in this war in any way. And so I think it like adds a dimension to them, because now you're sort of like, before you may have been, I remember thinking like, well, why don't they just wipe them all out? And now it's
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, but I don't think they should, because not all of them are contributing to this. Um, but I think with the and two, the way that like this Jedi heresy is starting to infect the Yuuzhan Vald, especially among like the lowest of them,
Mm-hmm.
that because of Anakin and Tahiri's actions on Yavin 4, the shamed ones and the lower class Yuuzhan Vald now see the Jedi as these heroes, these potential saviors. It really, I don't know, it like changed my perception of them even further. And I think too, seeing the Jedi, that as we've seen along, there's these different factions within the Jedi Order, that there's some like Luke who want to like wait and see what happens, and then Kype who's saying like attack first no
Mm-hmm.
matter what.
Mm-hmm.
That you can't just say like the Jedi are good and the Yuuzhan Vald are bad. Like, yes, the Yuuzhan Vald are bad, but not all of them, and they've been indoctrinated to become this way, and like, can we save them? And with the Jedi, it's like, because they don't have like, there's these different factions at play, they don't have one approach to the problem and like one way of looking at things. So it's sort of like, how will they be able to unite to face against this foe, even though they are, but they're still squabbling?
Yeah. I got to tip my hat to how the authors approached this series. And you just see the levels of structure and preparation and strategizing when and how to reveal this information. And I think it works wonderfully throughout 19 books, where slowly this species and this warfare canvas emerges, and you start learning and delving into it. Just like in our own society, we have people who are more left-leaning, people who are more right-leaning, but sometimes it's not evident or clear why we choose a particular side. There could be reasons beyond our comprehensions, like, hey, maybe this or that candidate is not ideal person, but maybe I'm just tired of the old ways. I want to chance it and throw my ballot into this direction. It's always complex. It's always layered. It's always interesting. And it just reminds us that sometimes even the pure guiding light of the Jedi is not that much different from the Vong. They're obviously trying to accomplish different things, and we know what the Jedi stand for, and they always are supposed to act selflessly and in defense and for the greater good for others, very much like the Japanese samurai, right? Which the whole tradition designed to serve others, not just your lord, but to serve the public, serve the common good. And in a way, Vong, as much as they're like these creepy, scary guys who are invaders and their actions are not necessarily justified, this is where Star Wars gets into more of that gray area. If before the status quo was like, okay, this is a traditional mythological folktale of good always prevailing over evil. Earlier Bantam era books kind of sort of started experimenting with more different tones in their books of different genres. I would say the new Jedi Order series is where they really go full force with it. In other words, it doesn't toy around with the idea like, hey, what if we just present a different angle on the Jedi? Like, they're not always likable or always chivalrous or always have all the answers, and they have their limits. And I think this book begins to have that pivotal point, and in more ways than once. As we get to another subplot in this discussion, we will also discuss another pivotal point in this book where we feel like, wow, we're one major hill in the storytelling, and I can't wait to see where things go from now. All right, guys, and here we're continuing with our next subplot here. I promise there's quite a few things to cover, but hopefully things will begin to make sense with you, as basically this is all part of one greater novel and how all the sequences and segments fit in together. So this is a smaller segment here. This is basically Jacen Solo. He's traveling around the galaxy with his mom, Leia, with her honor bodyguards, the Nogri, right? And they're trying to avoid the Yuzong Vong attention after humiliating their war master Tsavang Law at Duro. So basically, Jacen goes through a personal conflict with Han Solo over his moral values and his stance on this war. They kind of settle, or let's say set aside their differences as father and son, and they're trying to be a family and trying to lead a front in this war. And they escape Tsavang Law's pursuit. My first question is, Jacen's outlook on the Force and the war. Did you feel that there is a sense of foreshadowing of what is about to come? Obviously, a lot of it will translate into legacy if we can now kind of like just keep a general legacy, not reveal a lot of information there. But how did you feel about Jacen at this point in the book?
Yeah, so I feel like continuing on from my feelings balance point, Jacen, and I think this is so accurate for a teenager, but my feelings for Jacen went up and down and up and down and up and down throughout the new Jedi Order, because you're right. He's always questioning things, but Anakin looks within, because Anakin has this like horrible legacy to live up to where he's named after Anakin Skywalker. And it's like, I don't want to go down that same path. And Jacen's always questioning things, but he's always looking like out at like the galaxy as a whole. And
he's a smart one.
Yeah. Yeah. He's very philosophical. And in Balance Point, he had a vision, and what he decided out of that vision was that so that he wouldn't make the wrong choice, he just wasn't going to use the Force at all. But when it came down to whether, if his mother's going to die or not, he used the Force again. But he's still questioning things. He's not sure if he took the right approach. He's like, my actions made the war worse for everyone else, even though as a reader, you could read and be like, this feels like an escalation that was going to happen no matter what. Like, no matter what Jacen did in his fight with Savon Law was going to turn on the Jedi at some point. I remember feeling frustrated with Jacen here and not even be able to articulate why, because at least in Balance Point, I could say it's silly to not use the Force. It's silly to run away from your abilities. But here, I felt like I got frustrated with him, but at the same time, I liked that he and Han actually talked things through, that there was like this underlying aggravation between the father and the son, and they actually sat down and were like, even if Han was like, I don't understand why you're acting this way, but you know what, you're my son, and let's just put this aside for now. But yeah, so I guess the short of it is that Jason annoyed me in this book, and I'm not even quite sure why.
You know, if we remember the lines from The Last Jedi, when Luke Skywalker gives Rey the whole picture about the Jedi Order, the Jedi hubris specifically, that's what Jason represented for me in the new Jedi Order, the Jedi hubris. And the difference being, if in Star Wars prequels, the Jedi Masters should have freaking known better, man.
Yeah.
When they court these ideas of the chosen one, even before young 9-year-old boys stepped into their, Jedi Tower and they started asking a question, even when you just court those ideas, and then the boy comes, you should have handled things better. You should have had more hindsight. You should have looked at who is in your surroundings. I still can't fathom how 10,000 strong Jedi with 20,000 year tradition of handling business with the Sith, they couldn't identify one Sith Lord amongst them. Like, what good are you for then, guys? You're no good. They're adults. They're in their prime. They have masters like, Master Yoda and, Mace Windu and so forth. Well, in Jason's instance, it's an entirely different story. He's a kid. Yes. He's lost. He's confused. He's traumatized. He's physically tortured. But there's this inescapable vortex of ego and ambition. And even when he has like retrospective moments, it's always, no. I know what's up. It's that youthful 20-year plus maximalism. Like, I know how the world functions. Don't tell me better. I don't want to listen to like old geezers trying to tell me how the world knows. I know now. I have my college degree. Look at me now, right? And then when you hit 30, you're like, you hit pause for a second. Hold on a second. Let's reevaluate a little bit. Jason doesn't have that time.
No.
His home world, his home galaxy is threatened, and unfortunately, there's no other way around for him. What does Jason's brush with the Savang Law and escaping them and trying to navigate how to fight the war next, like, what does it represent? How does that help the Jedi Order?
So I think, it's hard to say, like, well, the Vaughn declaring war on all Jedi and saying that, they're putting out bounties for all of them makes it better. But I do think it unifies them in a way that they maybe weren't before, that now they all face this threat. And it's not just the Yuuzhan Vong, it's sympathizers who live within their own galaxy, that they felt safe before. Even if the world was at war, they felt safe, and now they don't, because anyone on any planet could be like, oh, I'm gonna turn them in. And so I think there's still all this dissension within the Jedi ranks, but it gives them this common goal to work through, the safety of the Jedi Order, having this system in place to move Jedi in danger to safety. That I think if Savon Law hadn't done that broadcast asking for the heads of all the Jedi, they may not have gotten to that point, or at least not at this point in the story. Yeah.
I always kind of second guessing whose direction is more correct. Is it Luke? Obviously, Luke represents the head of the Jedi Order. He's like, no, everyone follow my lead. And Jason is a much more maverick than even Kip Duran. Yeah. Kip Duran is he's trigger happy. Jason opposes his uncle ideologically, and he poses very serious questions. That's why he intrigued me as a character, where Kip Duran's antics are more like a knee-jerk reaction. Jason is, once again, far more mature, above his years, and the questions that he's raising and the tactics that he's resorting with, especially with Vergiri later on, okay, this is legit. This is valid question. This is big question. He just without any reservation, he topples that on top of Luke's shoulders. And I kept second guessing, like, you know what, if the Jedi tactics fail, maybe his answer will be the right one. Maybe this is the right thing to do in the long run, and maybe the Jedi don't need to necessarily stick to one side of the Force and indeed embrace that larger view, which Jason starts to adapt more and more as we go through the series.
Yeah. And I feel too, Jason was one of the few characters, especially in the beginning of the series, that was saying, I think the Jedi are too heavily involved with politics.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Luke, having started the Jedi Order with the blessing of Mon Mothma and being essentially like funded by the New Republic, can't see like the importance of putting that distance between the Jedi Order and the Republic. But like, as we saw in the prequels, that's part of where the Jedi Order went wrong, that they were like serving at the will of the Chancellor, letting themselves be used as a military might, when, you know, maybe Jason's right and they should separate themselves from politics and all these powers in the galaxy.
Yeah, I think whether through the accident or by design, because those books were coming out as we were experiencing the prequel trilogy, just the stories align very well with the Jedi hubris of why the Jedi failed. And now over here, they're kind of like moving on this uneven ground, and slowly Luke is trying to navigate them, steer in the right direction, and Jason also asking questions along the way. Yeah. Now we're moving into the beefiest, juiciest part of this novel, which I absolutely love. We're going to talk about Nian Yum. I just adore this character. Very quick reminder to our listeners. She is from the Shaper caste. She practices the art of biotech in combination with these organic engineering. She is the one that tortured and experimented on Tahiri Vela to make the young Jedi woman believe that she's this Yuzong Wang warrior trapped inside of her, or it's like a change of identity. She tries to save the ship that she's on, and she's doing that by resorting to heretical tactics. What she's doing is not allowed with the Yuzong Wang. Her plan is foiled, and she's confronted by Onimi, this character who's disguised himself as a master shaper, Kai Kwan. And he's acting on the behalf of the Supreme Overlord Shimron. He tells her that the ship is lost, and the best choice they have now is actually to throw all of their efforts into attacking the New Republic fleet. Nian Yum tries to kill him for not helping save their own people. She's actually standing up for her tribe. He is not. And she discovers that there's no such thing as the 8th cortex. So, and this is something very, very crucial to their culture, because this is what their entire Yuzong Wang belief system is based on. And she finds out that it's just full of holes and lies. And this anime character reveals his true nature, that he is the puppet master, that he has force ability believed to be lost among the Yuzong Wang people. And now he introduces Shimron. And the Supreme Overlord elevates Nian Yum to the Master Shaper rank, and he instructs her to build this 8th cortex. There's quite a lot of things revealed here. There's quite a lot of things further building this Yuzong Wang culture. How do you personally view Nian Yum? Is she a traitor, or is she a true patriot?
I think Nian Yum, because she just wants to save her people. Like, she may not follow their very stringent rules, but as we see in this book, everything she does is just for the good of her people. It was a really interesting change for me, because in the first book, she's a sympathetic character, but she's doing horrible things. And so I wasn't sure at first, like, am I gonna like her? But she's so sympathetic here because she's on a dying world ship. She just wants to save everyone on there, save the ship, save her people. I think it showed us the urgency of why they attacked the galaxy far, far away, because their ships are dying, like their worlds essentially are ending.
They're desperate.
Yeah, and Nian Yum is willing to do anything to help them. Um, and it does seem from her story that like these guidelines, these rules they have in place aren't helping their culture progress or evolve, but have them like stuck in a state of like, that's why the world ships are dying, because they're not trying new things. And even though it may be heretical, she's doing the right thing and trying to help others.
Mm-hmm. I also want to bring like a different aspect of this character into discussion, which I don't know. I'm a very visual person, right?
Mm-hmm.
I always drew all my life. I like have a degree in traditional animation, so visuals matter to me. I even would go like on a shopping spree to Barnes and Nobles, and I would like on random impulse pick a book based on its cover and start reading the synopsis if I like it.
Mm-hmm.
And the image of the Yuzong Vong, especially from those Japanese covers that you and I discussed, and even the American covers, when I first saw Nia Noom, something about her, just the visuals of her as I'm reading the novel, stayed with me. It's that combination of that grotesque visage of physical disfigurement. There's Yuzong Vong, they cut up their like extremities, their noses, they put tattoos. It's repulsive, it's crazy. But at the same time, there's a sex appeal in her character too.
Yes.
And I don't know why, but right? And this is a combination of these two things, seemingly superficial, what I'm pointing out here, but also you combine that with the character is going through. It's just, I couldn't help but feel like be in her orbit. Like, what's going to happen to her next? Because I felt in the first book, she's not entirely a true believer, a true patriot. She also have personal motives. It's almost the best comparison I can make is to World War II, the Nazi Germany's doctors, right? A lot of them are, the doctor, the angel of death, all this Auschwitz and all these horrible experiments they were making. I'm pretty sure a lot of those doctors who have pushed medical studies and surgery studies like 20, 30 years in advance through horrible acts, but I'm pretty sure a lot of them in their own warped way were convinced that they're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And not necessarily for the greater good of the pure race, but just for that maniacal, relentless scientist's discovery. Like, I need to do this. I need to see where this leads. Almost like Tahiri Vela is her pet project.
Mm-hmm.
But now there's a different aspect to this complex character comes in and into the second book, which she's now putting that all of it on the side, and she's able to step away from her personal obsession and try to genuinely help her people. And this is where my admiration for her like grew tenfold. I'm like, oh my God. Once again, reminding us of the fact that truly powerful stories, even within the sci-fi and fantasy realm, are people that are complex, are people that don't just have one side. And this is what Nia Noom was for me. The next question I have is this very interesting character of Anami. His grand revelation, he starts off as this laughable court clown, disfigured, shamed one. And we find out that he's the master manipulator, and there's this kind of like reverence into these older magical ways, almost like within the Warhammer 40K franchise, where you have these like priest class who like basically dictates to everyone else, and there's like reverence of the old technology. That's what this guy is, and he has force abilities. What was your impression on that whole thing, how they turned the tables there, and how his a character was revealed?
Yeah, it's like when we're first introduced to Anami in his disguise as the Master Shaper, it's like this is someone who seems to have some form of dementia, is hugely grotesque, and it's just this obstacle coming up against Nenyim, that Nenyim's just trying to save the ship, and K Quad is there to just like ruin everything. And then when he's revealed that this is Anami, that this is this very close associate of the supreme overlord of all the Yuzon involved, that this was a test to see if Nenyim was worthy of becoming the Master Shaper in charge of everything, then it definitely made me like, whoa, wait a minute, like almost that my understanding of the Yuzon involved hierarchy is sort of like thrown on its head, because like this is the first time we see Shimra, the supreme overlord, and like Anami clearly is capable of much more than we've seen just from this masquerade that he played in this one book, that you're like, oh, that this is an important character, and I hope and I know we will learn a lot more about him.
Mm-hmm. And it just further continued to blur the line between the Jedi and Yuzong Vong for me, because once again, it showed that from their perspective, from their angle, they're also capable of good, which if we define good by being selfless, not just acting out of your personal ambition, but trying to help others. And once again, learning that there's structures and there's, people playing their own tune. Like, just like within Jedi Order, Kip Duran is trying to pull a whole school of students his way, and he's saying, no, who is this old guy? Luke Skywalker, you're so boomer generation, get lost. We're going to start doing things our own way. Same very thing is happening with Yuzong Vong. And the revelation of Anemi's Force abilities, I felt, were particularly striking, because up to this point, we're like 8 books in, all the authors are playing it by the book. There's not a single hint that there's any of these guys will be Force sensitive. They create a very well fleshed out people. First of all, for me, it was a completely entirely new concept. Maybe I haven't read a lot of science fiction at the time, but a biologically based force where they grow their armor, they grow their weapons, they grow everything that they use, and they despise everything that is technological. It's such an interesting premise, such a cool hook, that you stay with it for 8 books. And then when they flip it on you, it is so effective. It's so in your face. I'm like, hit pause for a second. What are you telling me? You lied to me? But it's done in such a good way that, I felt it was very effective. The last major story arc happening in this book is Chief of State Borsphalia. He demands arrest of Luke and Skywalker. Surprise! The biggest heroes of this series are now proclaimed to be put out a search warrant for them. So Jedi Master Kent Hamner, he alerts them. He tells them both to leave Coruscant on errant venture, and that the New Republic government no longer associates with or supports the New Jedi Order. Allegedly, Borsphalia gives them the time to escape because he perhaps has his own motivations, or he sees the whole picture. And as they escape, we learn that Mara's illness is in full swing. It's completely back, and this Coom spore is trying to threaten her unborn child. Mm-hmm. At this point, Luke resorts to the dark side arts and whatever is necessary to expel this virus from Mara's body. That fails. Obviously, the dark side use is not the answer. But what does work is Luke Skywalker's coming back to the Force with his wife, Mara Jade, and with their unborn child. And they are now finally able to permanently dispel this curse, and this virus is no longer in her body. She's fully healed. She's back to normal. And the book ends with a new Skywalker, Ben, being born into the family. So a lot of things are happening here. First, let's talk about the strained relationship that the New Republic has with the Jedi Order. And once again, how did you feel about that and the things to come, kind of looking forward to the Legacy series?
Yeah. In a way, I felt like it was a long time coming, because Borsphalia has been, if not completely unsupportive of the Jedi Order, it's sort of a thorn in their side from the very beginning, that he has his own agenda. He doesn't really like Luke or get along with Luke, and so he's always putting obstacles in their way. And I think, especially after Saval Law's proclamation about how, they're turning on all the Jedi, they want all the Jedi's heads, it was only a matter of time before Borst decided it was, in his best political interest to sort of remove his authority and his favor and his friendship from the Jedi Order. But it does seem now like without the support of the New Republic, the Jedi are a lot more like the scrappy rebellion. Like they're going to have to do everything on their own. They have allies. They'll have to make more allies. It like makes it much more original trilogy in a way that they don't have these like support systems in place. They're going to have to build things from scratch. You know, they're probably going to find a base and then leave the base and things like that.
That's such a cool angle. That's such an interesting observation, because now as you're talking about it, I'm thinking about the sequel trilogy and how I really did not like that suddenly the good guys who won 30 years after them, the minority again, they're the resistance, and this BS New Order comes in, like they're powerful. You're like, get out of my face with that, man. Like, I mean, I enjoy my sequels, but like, come on, it felt so unnecessary and unrealistic, where here it felt like it was earned story-wise. And I'll be honest with you, until the last second, until, you know, the failure, I think that's going to happen in the future books, that huge rats escaping the sinking ship kind of thing. I think it's going to be towards the end of the series. We'll talk about it at length. But until the last moment, I was hopeful that, look, he is a politician. He is serving out of self-interest and out of fear of what the Vong represented, maybe false hope that like, hey, maybe if we placate them, things will resort to normal. I was holding out hope that behind all of that, because Boltons are known for having very tactical minds, thinking 3-4 steps ahead in a chess game. And I was thinking perhaps maybe he's putting out that cynical front, and he always like has these verbal jabs at the Jedi and everyone else. But in the long run, there is a strong foundation and strong personal core that he's operating from, that he's still standing by the new Jedi Order, the New Republic.
Yeah.
Next one I wanted to ask are Borskfalia's motivations, how he plays along with his supporters versus his political opponents. Once again, returning to the question, I guess I'm reiterating a bit, but is he a shrewd diplomat or is he a selfish opportunist?
I think he's both.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, a lot of what he does is to benefit the Bothans, but more specifically himself. It does feel like the only reason Borsk became president was just because he was like not the last one standing, but he'd been there. You know, he's a senior politician at this point. It's almost like he outlasted all of his opponents. Very Game of Thrones of him. And, but I do think that he's trying to play the middle ground. So he doesn't want to completely draw support from the Jedi, but he also doesn't want to like go fully in and be like, we stand behind the Jedi and then the Vaughn to like attack more New Republic. Because it seems like at this point in the story, there's almost like a stalemate going on, that as long as the Yuuzhan are going after the Jedi, they're not like pushing these big offenses on worlds, that everything is like secretive. So it's Nominor sneaking into Yagdul. It's them taking Yavin 4, but Yavin 4 is like only important because it's the home of the Jedi Academy. And that it feels to me like Borsk is just trying to prolong that as long as he can. Like if they can keep this stalemate and he can maybe build up forces, reinforce things, then once the Vol do start attacking again, he'll be in a better place. But yeah, a lot of it is selfish self-interest.
I think you've expressed it way better than I ever could. That's why I enjoy your channel. That's why I love the way that we review books. You just have this insight that I perhaps see, but sometimes I just don't have the right way like of expressing it. It's exactly what I was trying to say about Borskfalia is what is he doing? Like how he's like layering everything in front of him. It's like, oh, okay, I'm gonna use. He's slippery. He's like slimy and flimsy, like which is like a staple characteristic of your stereotypical politician. Obviously, there are politicians who like stand their ground and they wave the fist in the air. They want to stand up for something, but generally they're like, "What are my options here? Like, what am I doing? Like, I'm gonna push this button over here. I'm gonna push the red button, blow everything to smithereens if it doesn't work." So in that sense, but I don't know. As I was reading this series, there was something like I wasn't like entirely negligent with the character. I wasn't like, get rid of him. Like, I hope he
Right.
dies soon. There's something about him that pulled me, and I'm like, perhaps, he'll come through for the guys at the end. And we'll learn at the end what really
Yeah.
happens with him. um, let's talk about Luke Skywalker and Mara Jade. We finally reached this place where they gotta tackle the issue with Mara's illness head on. There is no stepping back. Up to this point into the series, did you feel like you had enough of this nonsense? Like, can we get past this point? Was it starting to get tiring? Or did you feel like, oh, okay, no, I'm so invested. I want to see what happens next. Like, where were you emotionally with Mara's illness?
I was ready for Mara's illness to be resolved, I think, because it's so debilitating. And then Verger gives her this cure, but of course we know, oh, it's a cure, but it can't be a permanent cure. And then, she finds out that she's expecting a child. And then, especially in this book, when her illness recurs because Verger's temporary cure had built up this toxicity, I was just like, please, she's one of my favorite characters. I don't want her to die. I just want her to be everything she used to be. So I was very happy that she was cured in the end, because I wanted Mara as she used to be back again.
I honestly don't have anything more to add here. I was cheering for her so much. I'm like, no, you can't kill her off. That's Luke's girl. That's his woman. That's his wife. Like, no way, man. And it's like she's equal to Luke in every regard, every respect. The strength of character, her emotions and feelings that she brings into the Skywalker family.
Yeah.
Like, you want her to be well. I wasn't necessarily exhausted with the idea of her being sick, but I also wanted to be resolved. But how was that resolution for you? Luke's tapping into the dark side, which is very, very personal. He's like, hey, like, you're messing with my family, bro. This is my child. This is my wife. No more messing around. He goes there, delves into the dark side versus the family joining together in the Force. How do you like the two?
I definitely felt like this wasn't something Luke could solve on his own, because it affects Mara, it affects their child, it affects all three of them. So I did feel like the ending felt a little Deus ex machina to me. I think just because we don't get like an explanation of how everything worked. But at the same time, I did like that it took all three of them. It took Mara herself, it took Luke, and it took the two of them joining with little tiny Ben to eradicate this from her. Like, it literally took their whole family to save her.
Yeah, I think on the surface, it might seem like a very far-fetched and cheesy idea. Like, it's the happily ever after idea of like, oh, look, the wife and the husband and the unborn son, they all join in the Force. But for me, it was such a transcending moment where it showed us what the Force can do without explaining the Force. This is, I think, where Star Wars shines the brightest. When you don't explain me the mechanics of magic, tell me what it is, but you show me the miracle of it, what it's capable of doing, where two minds and hearts join together. And their infant, unborn, like son, he's not an infant, he's like an embryo. He's like reaches out there through the Force and he's healed. It was like a moment of miracle, something comparable to, biblical theology of the birth of Christ, almost.
Yeah.
Not signifying that this child will be like prophecy, not that aspect of it, but what is capable, the miracle of something that a human being could never predict would happen, did happen. But I did also like that Luke was able to play around with the darker side, because I enjoyed Luke Skywalker, where he's like, hey, in order to understand the Force, what we later will see in Swarm War trilogy versus the Killiks, where, in my eyes, this is where Luke Skywalker becomes the Grandmaster. He's like, I walk the fine line between here and here. I can summon the Force lightning. I can completely control myself. And this was his kind of like first dabble with it, where I was like, oh, if Luke is indeed capable to find an ancient technique, which kind of like helps him save his wife, what Anakin wasn't able to do. That perhaps Luke is indeed more powerful, then perhaps indeed the Jedi have been looking at it all the wrong way. And there isn't two aspects of the Force, it's just how you use it. And you could use it for good. So that was a part of it too. And the last question I have for us today is obviously the birth of Ben Skywalker. Finally, it is like Luke Skywalker is like the late bloomer in the Skywalker family. He bounces all around the galaxy, searching for answers, trying to train students. Finally, not only he has a wife, now he's a father.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you, Meg, what does Ben Skywalker's birth signify in this book particular, and in retrospect, as you view the entire New Jedi Order series?
It's such a hopeful moment. Like, even as all these horrific events are occurring around them in the midst of war, like Mara and Luke have a little boy. And I think it shows that no matter how bad things get, it's going to be okay, because, you know, he's going to have a future. He's going to have a galaxy to grow up in. He may not be entering the galaxy at the best time, but it's, especially leading into Star by Star, it was such a moment of hope and like feeling like things were going to turn out okay.
Were you making like mental notes like I did? Like, okay, so we have a new Skywalker kid where you have two twins, we have Anakins. I'm curious to see how they're going to interact with one another. I'm curious to see how he's going to interact with Uncle Solo and Aunt Leia. Were you like thinking ahead of the time? I
was very, I mean, I knew at this point that he's a baby and he's going to be a baby for a bit. And babies are sort of like little potato sacks. They don't
You're useless.
have much at that point. But yeah, I was thinking ahead and like, oh, how's he going to interact with Han? Like, how's he going to interact with his aunt? Like, what kind of person is he going to be? Like, what are his interests going to be? I think it does open up a lot of possibilities for books beyond the New Jedi Order when Ben can come into a character in his own right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would totally agree with you, Meg. You know, this served as a pivotal point and finally give the readers that reward. It's like, hey, from this point forward, obviously we're still in the middle of the war. We are nearing the point of halfway through this series, but it's like, hey, things will resolve. You know, the Jedi will come out of this alive, if not unscathed. And it was a hopeful moment, and the two families get to celebrate together. But there's another aspect of it that I also wanted to bring is I was very curious. Like, some of my favorite Star Wars Legends books are with Luke Skywalker searching for the Jedi knowledge. The Children of the Jedi is probably one of my favorite Star Wars books. I know it gets criticized a lot. People are like, oh, it's cheesy, you know, the Eye of Palpatine. I like that a lot. It showed me Luke Skywalker and his relentless quest to find something that was not yet fleshed out in the Star Wars lore. And that was so beautiful that like we didn't necessarily know what the earlier Jedi were. Like, I was tapping into my 80s child's imagination circling around the original trilogy. What were these Jedi like? And now Luke is looking for them, and Han and Leia, and they're always in the footsteps in these ghost towns or these bunkers, but they never encounter anybody related to the Jedi. And once his son, Ben Skywalker, is born, I'm automatically thinking to myself, okay, this is no longer Luke's just his nephew or his students. This is his son. It's a whole new dynamic. It's a whole new relationship of how I'm going to address this young man's upbringing. And I was very curious and looking forward to seeing how Ben Skywalker's formative years will separate him from Jason, Jaina, and even Anakin.
Yeah.
What will he bring as a work in progress of Luke Skywalker? What values will Luke Skywalker instill in this kid, and then he will like raise the next generation of questions what the Jedi Order should be? Meg, I think we had an epic single book discussion this time. I think it's a good thing. You suggested and kind of like wrote the format just for one book. There was a lot of ground to cover, and we did indeed. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. For our next podcast, we're going to probably also tackle one book. So if it's something that is really large and demands our due attention, we'll probably do one book at a time. But we'll keep continuing this new Jedi Order series, and hopefully you guys will enjoy it. Meg, please tell us where our audience can find your channel, where they can view your book reviews. What's the latest video you're putting up? And, we'll say our goodbyes.
Yeah, I am on YouTube as Meg Reviews. I also post my reviews on Goodreads, and I haven't done anything on Instagram in a while, but I'm on there as the Meg Reviews. I'm finishing up Yoda Dark Rendezvous, and then next I will be tackling Labyrinth of Evil by James Luceno, which is the prequel leading directly into Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah, the prequel era Legends books are some of my favorite. Labyrinth of Evil, Cloak of Deception, all of like... What is happening here? They went brutal, man. There's like no warning this time.
I know. I was
like, just cut it.
And it was like, thanks for the meeting.
Sorry about that. Yeah, what was I saying? I was talking about the prequel. Oh yes, guys. Yeah. And as I was saying, sorry, as we got rudely interrupted here by Zoom, I was talking about how I really enjoyed the prequel books. And once again, guys, I encourage you, I'll include Meg's review links here in the video description below, in the actual video embedded as well. Go check out her reviews. I'm very curious what your thoughts are on the Labyrinth of Evil. That was one of the most unexpected readings I've ever had, and I'm looking forward to reviews. Anyway, guys, thanks a lot for joining us. If you enjoy my content, it's here at Star Wars Timeline. If you enjoy Meg, please go ahead, support her, like this video, swap over to her channel, check out some of the most awesome reviews on YouTube in regards to Star Wars, period. And Meg is very analytical. He goes in depth. She compares the different books, the completely different eras, and just your general knowledge of Star Wars books is vast. Anyway, guys, thanks a lot for watching. We'll check you out next time. Take care, everyone.